Paul answered, "Why are you weeping and breaking my heart? I'm ready not only to be bound, but also to die in Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." If you can understand, this is a phenomenal statement. He was being warned by two lots of prophets, Tyre and now in Caesarea. He's warned that if he goes to Jerusalem, he's going to be attacked and bound. And yet his answer is, why? Why stop me? I am ready to be bound and to die, or certainly go to Jerusalem in the name of the Lord Jesus. You know, you get something here of the position with Jesus himself. He was warned in going to Jerusalem that he would die, and he did. As you know, Paul is now facing the same situation, and verse 14 says he wouldn't be dissuaded. So the people speaking gave up and said, "The Lord's will be done." You know, you can see here, running right through the Acts of the Apostles, a very common and a very strong theme, which is a determination not necessarily to obey the words of the prophets and the warnings given, but to determine what you believe God's purpose is. And despite attempts to stop Paul, he is still determined, he still believes he has to be in Jerusalem. I'm only too aware of this, because in my life I faced a similar situation. I mean, when I was working 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago in the Soviet Union, particularly in the early days under communism, I knew that what I did would ultimately mean I would end up in prison. In fact, I never forget the last journey that I took with the Bible smuggling before my arrest. Actually, that last trip, I can remember standing at the front door of my house with my wife, and as I was saying goodbye to her, I was saying, I can't continue on with this. Little was I to know that that was to be prophetic, because that was the last Bible smuggling trip. Of course, after that, the ministry expanded. I mean, after the Bible smuggling, that's when all the evangelism expanded. So we have to be very careful whether we actually even follow the advice of the prophets. You need to know what God's will is in this. I believe in my life, despite the fact I was aware in what I was doing that there was a punishment. I was aware what happened to Christians. I know how many millions of Christians in the Soviet Union were killed and put in prison. And so Paul simply says, the Lord's will be done. Now, after this, in verse 15, the whole group got ready and went up to Jerusalem. And verse 16 makes it quite clear. It was quite a large group, because some of the disciples from Caesarea accompanied them and brought them to the home of Mnason, where we were to stay, who was a man from Cyprus and one of the early disciples. So Paul has arrived now at Jerusalem, and in verse 17, when he arrived, the brothers, that is the converts, the believers, the Jewish believers in the Messiah, knowing and recognizing Jesus as the Messiah, received him warmly. And it's very interesting because one begins to see Paul's purpose in being here, because in verse 18, the next day Paul and the whole group went to see James and all the elders in Jerusalem. You know that Jerusalem still was the head, because time and time again you find that Jerusalem is issuing the instructions to the early church. So, when he's with them in verse 19, Paul greets them and reports very much detail what God has done among the Gentiles. Now, this is a very critical issue, because at the beginning it definitely appeared that the message of Jesus was to the Jews. He preached to his own. That's absolutely clear. Jesus did not preach to the Gentiles. He preached to the Jews. The first converts were Jews on the day of Pentecost. Even when there were so many thousand there, they were Jewish people celebrating Pentecost. Not celebrating Pentecost as we know it, but celebrating the Jewish feast on the day of Pentecost. So now you've got the situation where Paul, because not only Paul, remember it's Peter also that had the vision of the unclean beasts on the sheet, and God sent Peter to the Gentiles. Now we've got the evidence that Paul is sent to the Gentiles. So it's very strongly coming out here without any question from the Bible, from the Acts of the Apostles, that the message is clear. It is to the Gentiles as well as the Jews. But you need to see what's happening, because after he's given the details of what God has done amongst the Gentiles, in verse 20, when the elders in Jerusalem, remember these are the elders of the early church, when they heard it, they rejoiced, praising God. And then they said something interesting. They said to Paul, "You see, brother, how many thousands of Jews have believed." So now you've got the contrast. Paul is coming back with the report of evangelism amongst the Gentiles. When he gets back to Jerusalem, the Jewish leaders are saying, "Look at the thousands of Jews who have been converted." And now this is the problem. And you've got to look at this verse 20. You see, they're praising Paul because of the work amongst the Gentiles. Then they say, "Brother, look how many thousands of Jews have believed, and all of them are keeping the law." The Mosaic law. So you've got a very clear situation here, that the early church, centered in Jerusalem with the elders, is indicating that amongst the Jewish converts, that they are still keeping Mosaic law.